let's get started on C Sharp. So I have opened a new Visual Studio. From the last video, we've installed Visual Studio and all the .NET SDKs. So go ahead and open up Visual Studio and create a console app. So you can just type here console and it will appear. Just click on that and next. You can name your project whichever name you would like. I am going to name mine C Sharp and choose a location and click on next. I am using .NET 8. This is the current one. You have, well, I only have .NET 8, but there are previous versions out there, but this is the newest version for .NET. So leave it at .NET 8 and create. As you open up from last video, we saw that it comes with a printing statement. Basically, the compiler would print a hello world to the console. So now we are getting started on programming and we'll actually write some lines of code. So go ahead and delete this. And we are starting fresh. So if you remember, we did some printing statements like this, hello world. And as a reminder, this is a comment. This whole line is a comment. And when we run this application, this printing will not compile. So it will only print hello world. As of now, just remember that the syntax for printing something is console.writeLine, and you put quotation mark and what's inside. And remember to close your statement with a semicolon. So now we're going to do a small exercise. We are actually going to print some more statement. So how would you print welcome, if I can get my spelling right? Welcome to C Sharp. So I would say console.writeLine, welcome to C Sharp. You can go ahead and print as many statements as you would wish. So yeah, that's an exercise for you guys. For example, if I want to say I am excited to learn C Sharp, so you would say console, and you can see that the compiler is already suggesting. That's the benefit of using an IDE, is that it gives you suggestion of what it thinks that you may be wanting to write. So you can click on tab and double quotation mark and say, I am excited, and close your quotation mark, parenthesis, and semicolon. So now let's go ahead and run this. So you can just start without debugging or control F5, and it's going to build. You can see at the bottom here, and once the build has succeeded, you would see a terminal that would look like this. Let me make this bigger for you guys. You can see that it printed hello world, welcome to C Sharp, and I am excited. So that's what we pretty much did from last video. So now we are going to print more statement and learn about data types. So before we move on to data types, you would notice there is another printing, there is something else called write. So if I say console.write and I say hello, this would also print hello to the console. So what is the difference between the two? Well, let's find out. So you would see that when I say welcome to C Sharp and I am excited, these two statements came out in different lines. The difference is that if I use write, it will be in one line. So let's say I do hello, and then I say world. So even though I wrote two different statements here, because I've used write, not write line, it will write these two statements in one statement. Whereas here, when I said write line, it added a new line after this first sentence here, and therefore I am excited starts on a new line. So that's the difference between write and write line. So let's debug. You would see here, hello world, I am excited. And you can see here, hello world. So it didn't even write, like it just put those two words together as one word. Compared to when I said write line, this is what it printed. So write line adds a new line, therefore the next statement would start on a new line, whereas write would print those two things together like this. So that's all about printing statements. Now let's move on to data types. So before we move on to data types, I just want to point out here, notice how all this is green, and all the greens in Visual Studio means they are comments. So this is a multi-line comments compared to this is just a single line. But when you do /**, and anything you put in between these two symbols are called multiple line comments. So this, when I run the compiler, it will not compile at all because these are all comments. And usually I would use comments to explain a concept to you guys, but you can also use comments to say what you're doing pretty much, so that whenever you come next time, you would know that, okay, the difference between write and write line is this. So you write comments for that purpose. So let's move on to data types. So data types, we have about 5 to 6 common data types in C#. Those are the common types used in C#. So we have characters, string, integers, decimals, and Boolean. So characters are basically things like, let me make this bigger for you guys. I'll do 150, yeah. So characters are things like A, B, C. Notice how, and it could be like a point or like a quotation, this sign, quotation mark, yeah. And then strings, on the other hand, is things like words or sentences. We saw that here we wrote a string, hello world. So you notice how a string is a bunch of characters together that makes up a string. And integers are basically whole numbers. They could be negative. These are things like 10 or -4 or 5. Those are whole numbers. Now, the numbers that have decimals, or the numbers that could be written as a fraction, are called decimals. So that's a data type. And we also have Boolean for things like true or false. So let's say if I ask you, have you eaten? You can say yes or no, or true or false, right? And true is represented as 1, and false is represented as 0. But just remember, Boolean are either true or false. Okay, so now let's see a few examples of these data types. We would write all of them for us to understand how they are printed. So here I have pretty much printed some of these data types. So we have characters, like I said, I could write A, and notice how for characters I have only one single quote compared to a string where I have two double quotes, I think it's called in English. So that's the difference between representing a character data type and a string data type. Now we have integers, like I said, -4 or 5. So I want to print 10 to the console. So I would say console.writeLine 10. I could also say console.writeLine -10. It still works. Notice how notice how here, for example, if I say double quotation mark A, no, I mean like single quotation mark and I say AB, this is gonna gives me an error. Why? Because I'm saying to the compiler, by using the single quote here, it's expecting a single character, but I'm giving it 2 characters. So you can see that this error says too many characters in a character literal. So it's expecting a character, however, I've given it a string. So if I'm going to have a B, then I need to put double quotation mark, just like we've done here. So to fix that, I'm just going to remove B and leave it as A. And then we have a boolean. So booleans are either true or false. So now let's run this and see what it is. I am just going to comment this out just so that we don't get this. So to comment things out, you highlight it and you come up here and comment out. So you can see now it's highlighted in green and none of these things that I've written are going to compile. So we can just focus on printing this statements here. So go ahead and debug. And you can see that it printed A. So this is a character, this is a string, this is an integer, and this is a boolean. I hope this makes sense right now, but I think over time you would get the hang of this. And we have more data types. So let's look at decimals. So we've said that decimals are things that could be written as a fraction. And in the real world, we have precisions because there is an error, there's a precision that something can have. So we have 3 types of decimals in C#. We have floats, we have doubles, and we have decimal. So floats is the least precise, just because the precision goes to 9-digit, doubles more precise than the float. It goes from 15 to 17-digit, and decimals is the most precise one, so from 28 to 29. So how do you know when to use any of this? It's mostly just how much precision do you want in your data. I personally just use double because it's kind of like you don't need that much precision, but in some cases you do. But I use just doubles. But let's see how we write decimals, how we print decimals. So you just say console.writeLine. We put F for float and M for decimals and nothing for doubles. So if you want to write 0.25, you just put 0.25 and F. This notifies the compiler that I'm considering this as a float. And then if you don't put anything, the compiler will assume that you are printing a double. And then 0.56 M for decimal, like the M in the decimal. So let's go ahead and comment this out again. If you remember, you just highlight everything that you want to comment out and just click here. And then now we only have these 3 statements to print. So go ahead and debug, and voila. You see there is almost no difference technically, but if you would see this in practice when you're really dealing with operations, and it will add up. Like if you are truncating a number, let's say ending in 33333, if it's a float, it's only going to catch up to 9 digits. If it's a double, it's going to catch more. And if it's a decimal, of course, it's going to catch up to 28, I think. But that's how you would see the difference, right? So we would see that in practice just in a bit. Now let's close this out. But yeah. So now that we got a basic idea of data types, let's move on to a new topic, which is variables. This is very exciting because we're getting close to more fun stuff. So variables are containers for storing values. You see how here we literally hard-coded the value that we wanted. What if we don't want that? Like, what if I don't want to show the value directly here? I could name this value, give it a name, and just refer to this value by his name. So a value can change throughout the program. Let's say this year I'm 5 years old, but next year I'll be 6 years old. So that's a variable, right? So I could just assign 5 or 6 to a variable called age. And yeah, that's pretty much what a variable is. For example, here, let's see how we create a string variable. If you remember from above, we say that string is a form of data type. And I'm giving this string a name of first name and a value of David. So what this means is, imagine you have a box, and inside this box you have the word David, which is a string, and you're naming this box by first name. Or let's say you have a character, a box that you would name user option, and inside this box you have a character Y, and that's a character. Let's say it stands for yes. And yeah, so that's pretty much what variables are. They are just containers for storing a value. Now, why do we do this, right? Why do we do this? Why do we give names? What's the point of it? How do we access, let's say, first name or user option? What we could do is we could print these variables. So for example, we would say console.writeLine first name. Instead of saying console.writeLine David, we would say console.writeLine first name. So what this would do is that it will output the word David, because the box that's called first name contains the value David, so it will print David. Now, what if you want to say something like this? What if you want to say, oops, no. What if you want to say the user option is free, right? So you would say something like console.writeLine. If you say user option, it would only print the value that's in the user option, which is yes. But I want to mention user option is, right? So then you would put a string and say the user option is. Now, if I leave it like this, you can see that it's giving me an error. Why? Because, well, the compiler doesn't quite know what I'm trying to do here, right? Instead, if I want these two things to be combined, then I would add a plus. This is called concatenation. Specifically, it's called string concatenation. So concatenation simply means that I'm combining these two strings together to form one. Let's see what that looks like in practice. Let's run this. So again, I'm just gonna comment this out just so that we don't get distracted. And let's print this out. So you can see that I printed the first name, it printed David, and it says the user option is Y. So that's how you use variables and how you can recall a variable just by using the name of the variable. And you can play around with printing any of this. Let's say, for example, here you can create an integer by saying int game score is 3. Or you can also create a boolean saying is selected is true, and double. Let's say I want to have a container for my prices. So you'd say food prices 3.5. And if you remember what data type this is, it's a double. Well, it was kind of written here. So this is a double. Another thing you would notice is that I am writing this variable name in a very specific way. This is a convention, right? You can't start a name with, let's say, a percentage sign. You can't do that. And also notice how first and name, this is lowercase, and then name is uppercase. This is called camel cases. There is a bunch of rules that you need to follow, and I will make sure to link those convention down below. But simply just always start with a small letter, and then the next word started with a uppercase letter. And you can read more about how to properly name your variable because it's actually a thing. Notice how I can just say like dash first name. I always have to start with a letter. And then another way to declare variables is by using a var. So this is a keyword. And when do we use var is when you don't, like personally, when I don't quite know what data type this is. So basically what this does is that when you use var, the compiler would literally guess what the data type is based off of the value that it contains. So for example, here, last name, I said keys, and the compiler can see that this is a string. So automatically it will know that last name is a string. Another case we have is message. Let's say I write var message hello. Because the compiler sees that message contains the value string hello, the compiler will guess that message is a string. So this is similar to writing string message equal to hello. And by the way, the reason why it's complaining, it's because there is already a box called message. So if you hover over this error, it says here there is already a local variable called message. So I can't use that. So I need to change my name. So I could say another, and then I'll start with another message. So these two are similar. So I could either use var or string. But for good practice, it's always better to define exactly what data type you're using. All right, let me just delete this. So now how do you access this value, right? So let's print some variables. So if I say console.writeLine first name, can you guess what output is it going to be? So because first name, the box called first name contains the value David, It means that if I'm asking the compiler to print first name, it's gonna output David. Similarly, I can say console.writeLine last name. It's going to give me the value containing in last name, which is keys. And if I want these two things to be on the same line, I could do something like this. Console.write, and then I would say message. Let's comment. Actually, let's write both so that you guys can see the difference between write line and write again, just one more time. So I'm going to put give me the value contained in first name and give me the value contained in last name. So here it will do David, and then it will give a new line and write keys. But can you imagine, can you guess what output this is going to be? So it's going to print David. I meant to have a comment here, so it's going to print David. But because I am using write instead of write line, it's not going to add a new line. It's going to print keys just right beside it. So how do I put space in between these two? Because right now we can see that it's not going to add any space, and let's see that in a minute. Let's run this, and so we can really get this. Let me make it bigger. So you can see that when I use cancel.writeLine, it writes David and then keys. But when I say cancel.write, it just says David keys, and it even just continues with the next statement, right? And notice how there is no space between David and keys, and there is no space between the next printing statement. Let's think about how would we add space, right? So I want to write David and keys, but I want them to be on the same line. So that means I need to add a space. So I would do something like this, plus, and then quotation mark and space. I would write, my bad, I would write space and then plus, like this. So what this means is that it's going to print David, and then it's going to add the space, and then it's going to add the last name, keys, right? And so we saw that it was printing the next statement as well. So probably we want to have a new line here, right? We want to have a new line here. So I could say write line for this one. It's complaining about something. I don't know what it is. Oh, okay. So you see how the difference, can you guess why it's complaining? It's because I wrote write line with small letter, lowercase l, whereas it's supposed to be uppercase. So make sure you get the spelling exactly right. So now I'm saying, okay, write David and then put keys right besides it, but add a new line so that it prints the next statement on the next line. So let's print that and see what the result is. The build succeeded and voila. You see, so we have David keys and then it added a new line for the next statement. Let's look at this next statement here. So I would like to print user option is 3. I know that 3 is contained in something called user option. And basically here I'm doing the same thing I did above here, which is called string concatenation. So it's like adding two strings together to make up one. So I'm saying console.writeLine, I am writing the user is, and then I'm adding a plus, and then I'm saying give me the value contained in the box called user option. So therefore the result is the user option is Y, because Y here is defined over here. And we said it was a character and the value is Y, which stands for yes. So that's called string concatenation. There is another way of writing this, which is called string interpolation, right? String interpolation. And how we do that is by saying console dot write line. Instead, we would start by writing the $sign like this and put our quotation mark like that, right? And say the user option is. Now, instead of writing plus and user option, I would say user option like this. And this is just the compiler guessing, like, what I'm trying to do, but that's not what I'm trying to do. So I'll just like close my parentheses and end with a semicolon. So this is called string interpolation. And the result is pretty much the same, right? The user option is, and I can even write here between parentheses and say interpolation so we can see the difference. You can see the advantage of using string interpolation is that I don't have to put the plus here. The fact that I've put the $sign here, I can just write everything in one, but every single time I have to access a value, I need to put that name between these two symbols, right? And then just write everything else the way I would like it to be presented. So let's run this and see the result right here. The user option is Y. It's exactly the same thing, but this is string interpolation. And the reason why there was two parentheses, guess why? It's because here I added two parentheses. So let's fix that and rerun this. And now you can see what it did. So this is called string interpolation. Now, let's continue to some string formatting. I'm just gonna comment this out like this, and let's learn about basic string formatting in C#, right? And let's learn about something very common called the escape character, which is this symbol here. I think it's called the backward slash. Yes, the backward slash. So again, I'm just pointing out here that this is a multiple line comment and this is a single line comment. So make sure you don't get this confused. So this backward slash, when you write a backward slash and you put N, it's an instruction to the compiler to add a new line. And when you write a backward slash in T, it means tab, right? Let's see that in practice. Let's print a few more statements here, like so. So again, let's print hello, and then I have a tab here, and then world. So first, your guess you may be thinking, oh, I can just do this, that right line hello, and then maybe put a tab, maybe put space like this, and then say world, right? Let's see what's gonna happen here. And compared to if I say, well, I actually wrote it already here, so we can just comment that out. Compared to here, if I say console.writeLine hello and then tab and then world, right? Let's print this out. You see how here it added the exact amount of space for a tab, and here it's just exactly how I asked it to be. But let's say if I do like this, so this is doing hello and then new line world. Let's print out and see. Look, hello, and then it added a a new line, and then wrote world. And then this is for the tab character. So these are little shortcuts that you can use. Now, how would you write hello and then world in quotation mark like this? One option you could be thinking is, well, I could just do cancel that right line and say hello and then put the two quotation mark like this and say world. But notice how it's complaining, right? It's, well, if I can get my spelling right, hello and then world, it's still complaining. Why? Because it's saying that, well, this is a syntax error. It's expecting, some other character, but this is exactly how I want to write it. But it's not, it's giving me an error. So the way you do that is with this character, the escape character. again. If you want to write quotation mark in your printing statement, then you need to use the quotation mark here and the quotation mark here. Now you can see that the error is gone. And basically what this means is that it's gonna see the backward slash and consider this as something that you want to write, and it sees again another backslash and consider this as something you want to write as well, and then it's good to go. So let's see how that goes. Let's say I want to say hello this world, just so I can know the difference between the two. Okay, let's round this up, and it's building. And yay, you can see here it gave me exactly what I asked for and no error. Okay, so that's the use of the escape character. It allows us to write these shortcuts instead of us manually creating a new line. You can just use these, and these two are commonly used. Let's see some more example. Let's say I want to do something like this. Let's say I want to do something like this. I want to print this. Why would I want to do that? Well, this, if you're familiar with file path, this could be a file path. So you're asking the compiler maybe to, store this file path here. How would you do that? If you want, you can give it a go. So if I do same thing, console.writeLine and write C and then backward slash source and then repo like this, it's still complaining. Why? Well, because the compiler thinks that the backward slash is, you're trying to do some sort of shortcuts, but it doesn't recognize backward slash S, and so it's just confused. But we want the backward slash to be part of the string. So how do we do that? We write two backward slash. two backward slash. And then we write another backward slash here. So the first backward slash is letting the compiler know that, hey, the next character, just write it the same exact way, So it's going to write exactly what we have here. Okay, let's see. See? There's no error, and it's exactly how we asked the compiler to print it out. So those are the main ones that you would need to maybe memorize or, know about. Let's move on to something called verbatim string literals. So there is so much you could do with string that so verbatim string literals is that keeping the white space, right? And we use this symbol here, the @ So let's say I want to print hello world, but I want to put some space before. Instead of manually, I could just put the @ and then it's going to print exactly what I have inside the quotation mark. Okay, so let's see. Look, see, it added space. So the verbatim is literally saying, I'm literally saying to the compiler, print exactly what I have, right? What happens if I say, hello, and I want to do slash like this, right? Here, because I didn't have the @ symbol, I had to put the backward slash before my backward slash. But here, because it's a verbatim, it's going to exactly print. And notice how here it's not complaining because of this @ right? So let's see. See, like this. So could you guess how we would write this using the verbatim? Can you give it a go? We would say something like cancel dot write line parenthesis @ and then I'm gonna write it exactly how I want it, which is C backward slash source backward slash repo, like this, right? So you see the difference here. We had to write these two backward slashes because we didn't have the verbatim here. I hope you can really see what I'm trying to explain here, right? And which one is better? It's just up to you. It's just a matter of choice. Would you rather put the two backward slashes, or would you rather just do a string verbatim? Now let's run this up and see. And notice how it's exactly the same thing. Okay, these are just different ways of doing exactly the same thing. And it's up to you which one you prefer. All right, this is what where I'm gonna end this video, and we are continuing our journey on C# in our next video.